Hallo, Derek hier. Wir hatten kurz eine neue Frage-Antwort-Session und hier ist ein Ausschnitt davon, das für euch interessant sein könnte. Die Fragen diese Woche, die kamen aus Deutschland oder von Unterricht in Deutschland. Und die Fragen sind, warum die Tiere und die Fleisch von den Tieren auf Englisch unterschiedliche Namen haben, dass wir nicht die deutsche System machen wie Rind plus Fleisch gibt Rindfleisch, Schwein plus Fleisch gibt Schweinfleisch und so weiter, warum wir eine andere Methodik haben. Und Redewendungen, so idiomatische, sogenannte Idioms, was die sind, warum wir die brauchen und wie wir die benutzen sollen. Ich denke, es wird für Deutschsprachige besonders interessant diese Woche. So these next two questions actually came up in a class recently, and I think they're interesting enough that we can add them here. And the first one was to do with the name of the animal and the name of the meat from the animal. And it came specifically from a German class. So in German, the way you make the names of the meat is you take like the animal name and add like the word for meat at the end. So if you wanted to go to a butcher's and you wanted some pork, you would ask for pig meat, or if you wanted beef, you'd ask for cow meat, and so on. And the question was, well, why isn't it like this in English? Why do you have different names or almost unrelated names for pork from the pig and beef from the cow? This doesn't really make sense. And it's actually one of these historical things. So if you think back to the last, 2,000 years or so, United Kingdom, or that what we today call United Kingdom, has been invaded a lot by Romans and Vikings and Saxons and who else? Normans. And there was this, for the last 1,000 years or more, a continuous sort of problem with France going backwards and forwards. And what happened at some stage, and of course, each of these invaders all brought with them different cultures, different languages, and some of these aspects have just stuck and stayed with us. So what we call English today, the modern language, is really a real sort of hodgepodge of all different and separate influences and factors that have all been kind of mixed up together and called English, which is one of the reasons why so many things in English seem so illogical and inconsistent. So, for instance, there was a time a few hundred years ago when England was more like a satellite of France. The language of the court was French. All the upper nobility spoke French, and English wasn't really the official language at that period. And so what you then had is that the names of the foods we kept from the French influence. So if you take the French for pork is pork, I think with a C, and the French name for beef is bœuf. And that's why we have a different name, because the name of the food we've retained sort of the French influence, and the name of the animal, we've retained more of the Saxon influence. So that maybe explains this inconsistency. And the other question that came up was to do with idioms and their usage. And they said, well, these idioms are a bit difficult to understand and are a bit strange, and what's the deal with those? So idioms are one of the more interesting aspects of English, and at the same time for learners, one of the more confusing aspects. Because if we look at what is an idiom is a phrase or an expression that you can't really tell the meaning of by looking at the individual words. To give an example, in the doghouse. So if someone's in the doghouse, it has nothing to do with dogs. and has nothing to do with houses. You see what I mean when I said you can't tell the meaning by looking at the separate words. So what you'll have is in the doghouse, what this means is that a man, it's usually always a man, it's never a woman, has done something wrong or stupid, or didn't do something he was supposed to do, and his wife or girlfriend is cross with him, and she's going to stay cross with him until he makes up for that thing he did or didn't do. And all this information is sort of conveyed in this very short phrase, in the doghouse, which is, of course, then brings us to another reason why we use idioms, is compactness of information. So, for instance, a guy might be down the pub, or a colleague looking a bit down, and someone might say, "Oh, you okay?" And, yeah, in the doghouse. And this in the doghouse tells us all we need to know. So the thing that's interesting about idioms is how many idioms in different languages compare to the English idioms, or any other language really, but we'll use English because this is an English course. So for instance, do you have a similar idiom in your language? Or do you have a completely different idiom for that situation? Or maybe absolutely nothing comparable at all? And comparing idioms is actually quite interesting between languages. So if you're in an exam situation, please feel free to use idioms if they are suitable. If you're not sure though, or you're a bit uncertain and you don't want to risk it, then don't. Okay, there's nothing worse than trying to go for an idiom and getting it wrong, because you only need one word to be wrong. And I'll give you an example of what we mean by this. There's a very common but strange English expression for when the weather is really, really cold, we say it's cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. Now, it sounds a bit strange. You might start feeling sorry for all metal monkeys, but you don't need to. It's nothing to do with freezing his literal balls off. It's just an expression. Oh, let's go into this. The reason behind this, apparently, and there are those who contest this, is that in the olden days of English Navy, everything on a boat was a monkey. So the guy who put the powder in the cannons was the powder monkey. I think the guy who went right up on top of the mast was the mizzen monkey. Everything was a monkey for some reason. Nobody really knows why. And so what we had is these big cannonballs about this sort of size. Obviously, if one of those, the ship sort of rocks backwards and forwards with the water and the swell, and obviously if one of those lands on your toes, it's going to hurt, especially when we didn't have really decent medical facilities at the time, and specifically not on the ship. And if this happened, the only option you have before gangrene set in was just to amputate. So what they did is they had metal plates with holes cut in them to put the balls on, so that if it rolled around a bit, the balls would stay on this metal sheet. So what would happen was, if the hole was, say, this big, it would get this high before the ball rolled out. And if the hole was, say, this big, a lot bigger, the ship could lean a lot further before the ball rolled out. That was the idea. And so to optimize this usage, they used to make the holes as big as possible without the ball actually falling through. Now this sheet of metal they used was called a brass monkey. So if you think back to your days of physics, if you have a piece of metal with a hole in it and you heat the metal, the hole gets smaller. Which is maybe not what your intuition would tell you. And conversely, if you cool the metal down, the hole gets bigger. So this expression refers to the time when it was so cold on the boat that the metal cooled so much that the hole got bigger and the ball fell through the hole. And this is what, according to the theory of some, is meant by it's cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. Now, this is just the theory. There are those who say this is nonsense, but I kind of like the theory, and at least I would like it to be true. So here's the thing about this expression. Freeze the balls off a brass monkey. There's three important factors here. Not freeze the arms off a brass monkey, or freeze the balls off a bronze monkey, or even a brass gorilla. It has to be balls, brass, monkey. And if any one of those parts is wrong, the whole expression is wrong. And similarly, you have to use it in a suitable situation when it's like really, really bitterly cold. You can't use it on a summer's evening or sitting out in the garden and the sun's going down and it's not quite as warm as it was. Maybe should I put a cardigan on or something? That's not cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. You have to use the really specific situation, and then it's really bloody cold. That's when you would use this idiom. And you will find people using this idiom a lot in England. So yeah, that's the idioms and their usage. So in an exam situation, feel free, if you feel confident, use it. You'll get points from the examiner. If you're unsure, don't. Just express yourself in a more plain way. So, das war dieser kurze Ausschnitt für diese Woche. Ich hoffe, ihr fand das informativ und interessant. Die Mitgliedschaftsseite ist offiziell geöffnet. So, wenn du denkst, das könnte was für mich werden, Link in der Beschreibung. Du kannst darüber gucken. Vielleicht ist was für euch da. Ich denke schon. Es wird auf jeden Fall, es lohnt zu gucken. Vielleicht sehen wir uns da drin. Bis demnächst. Tschö.